Hi guys, before you get into the next amazing conversation with another amazing guest, I just wanted to tell you I have now moved over to Substack. So it's the Never Settle Podcast.substack.com. The reason I've done that is because of the increase in censorship I am finding on YouTube, and I'm worried that maybe one day they're going to deplatform me. So please head over to Substack and subscribe. I'm very new into it. It's growing. There will be a lot more content on there going forwards and hope to see you over there. Well, hello, lovely listeners, and welcome, viewers. Today, my guest is a wonderful lady called Michelle. We may also hear from another wonderful lady called Shelley a bit later on in this conversation. Michelle is here to talk about a man called Donald. Now, some of you listening and watching will go, "Oh, I wonder if this is Donald that is stuck in prison." Yes, that is the Donald. If you've not heard of Donald, then keep watching because what has happened to this poor, beautiful soul is just unbelievable. And it's the stuff that you would see in a Hollywood movie, quite frankly. So Michelle is here to tell us a little bit about Donald, who Donald is, how he ended up in prison 2.5 years ago now, and basically what's been happening to Donald in the last 2.5 years in terms of his treatment, or should I say mistreatment, and more importantly, what we can all do to create a solution to make sure that the mistreatment of Donald stops and we get him released as soon as possible. So, welcome, Michelle. Thank you so much for being on here. I applaud your bravery and also your tenacity in doing what you've been doing over the last 2 years. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you very much. I mean, really, when you know that something's unrighteous and it's wrong, then of course, it gives you that natural tenacity and that natural spirit to drive on.
Yeah,
Because out that at the moment we're living in unprecedented times, and what I mean by unprecedented is the fact that the people in charge, the people that we deem as public servants, are actually the ones that are corrupt and basically enslaving and subjugating basically.
absolutely.
All of-
Absolutely. Well, let's start with who is Donald? Why are you on here talking about this wonderful man called Donald?
Yeah, he is a wonderful man. He's incredibly brave, and he's full of integrity and morality. And he's been locked up in Scotland, as you said, on fraudulent paperwork since January 2023. So just over actually 2.5 years. He's not a young man. He's in his 60s. And he's never had any criminal background whatsoever. Prior to all this, he'd held very good jobs. He'd had jobs in all sorts of different areas, but he was held in high esteem in all those jobs. So he's never had any issues with the authorities, no criminal background whatsoever. He's well educated. He's got a university background. Not that that makes any difference, but we're just trying to paint a picture here. And as I've always said in all of these things, he's a firm believer that we're in a spiritual war at the moment, and that we're actually in the biblical last days. And he's standing as the living man, under the Creator, trust law, under God's law. He's been locked up in essence for that, really. To punish him for standing out of the commercial system because everything's in commerce.
So, Michelle, what did he do? How did he get pulled by the police, or how did the encounter begin?
Well, this has been going on for many years, and it was initially this. I will call this the smoke screen, the vehicle which enabled them to enact what they did. I don't know how familiar your viewers are, but at the end of the day, it's common knowledge that they use vehicles to enact an outcome. whether it be to get you off the streets, into prison, whatever. So this indictment, which was never served on Donald, was relating, or the smokescreen was relating to a disputed signature, which started in the civil courts in Scotland over a matrimonial home with his ex-wife. Now,
Wow.
in these civil court procedures, over this property that was jointly owned, what happened was, it somehow got fraudulently flipped into a criminal case, but he was never found guilty in the civil courts in Scotland. He never produced any evidence or anything. So unbeknown to him, this was all without him knowing, because they do all sorts of what you call closed courts. It somehow got flipped into a criminal case
So,
where it
so just so I'm clear, there was a dispute between him and his ex-wife, is this right?
was
Yeah.
over
And,
a matrimonial home
okay.
joint.
Yeah. And presumably there was an argument she wanted 100% or whatever they were arguing over. It's always bloody money, isn't it? Um, so how did that? So he just refused to put his signature to anything because it was in the courts?
So what happened was, she disputed that the signature on the agreement, which gave the free proceeds of the house to Donald, she disputed that signature was hers. But
Right.
but there was no evidence, there was no evidence brought into the court for Donald to dispute that claim, if you know what I mean. So
Mm.
what was it just marched on this civil claim, in which Donald was never privy to, or he never party to for the majority of it, and somehow it got criminally flipped to the criminal courts, where it was he was going to be indicted, and I say Donald, the legal entity, was going to be indicted for a so-called forgery of this signature, which
Right.
which never happened. He did,
So the ex-wife accused him of forging her signature, which he never did.
yeah,
And so this then got flipped into the criminal court because it's now forgery and fraud.
right,
At
yeah.
that point, did he start engaging more and go to the court?
No, because what he realised, that there was a bigger element attached to this. He realised very, very quickly that there was Freemasonry was involved in it. No,
And
it's
how did he realize that, Michelle?
um, just I can't go into detail, but I can guarantee that that's the case.
Okay.
So due to the Freemasonry, I mean, we all know what happens with Freemasonry. I don't know. Again, I'm not here to go into the ins and outs of it.
Yeah.
But basically, if they need a solicitor, they need an accountant, they need something, then there's a network there that will provide them with what it is that they want. Okay, and it's a club. It's what a form of a big boys club, in essence. So what had happened is this civil claim, arms and legs, Donald hadn't engaged in it. It was in their interests to take it to criminal, because in that way, then what they could do was they could fulfil what their intention was, which was basically to strip Donald of all his assets.
Yeah.
So this was in Scotland. So this indictment, or so-called indictment, was never served upon Donald. Okay, so what happened was, as I said, we haven't seen him since January 2023, when armed police turned up at the door. They didn't take any identification or anything like that, and basically took him to Doncaster police station, where he was assaulted by I don't know. I think it was about eight guards, something like that.
Just for the audience, how did it go from him not going to the criminal court to them turning up armed and basically, I mean, we know this goes on. I've just done a podcast. I don't know if you saw it with Trevor Melan, which is exactly the same thing, where he was dragged out of his home, because of Lloyd's Bank, basically.
Yeah.
Um, so how did it go from him not engaging in the criminal court to them turning up armed to
So
take?
yeah, so obviously the civil court got flipped to this criminal court, and that is something that they do. That's well known up in Scotland, that they flip it. And what happened was he didn't turn up because nothing was served for what you call a first diet. Well, a first diet is a first hearing in the Scottish courts. So armed police came, didn't come with a warrant, didn't come with anything, claiming this failure to appear at this first diet up in Scotland. Okay, and then so what they did then was they took him directly to Doncaster police station where he was assaulted. No photographs, no fingerprints, no identification of any form took place. He was beaten in, not processed, beaten in by these I don't know, team of police officers, and then at 3:30 in the morning, the following morning in January, taken directly up to a court in Scotland, and again, no form of ID, no photographs, no nothing, and then he was basically put into a cell and sentenced through the hatch of a cell door to a lie down, what you call a 7-day lie down, which is effectively remand. And he was put into HMP Perth.
He was
Again,
put into a court at 3:30 in the morning, and there was people there working.
well, again, I think it might have been the following morning. No, I'm not sure. Actually, thinking about it now, you've asked me that question. But basically, it wasn't a functioning court. There was a judge waiting for him there. He didn't go into the court at all. And when Donald said that I am not a legal entity, that's
Mm.
when he him into the cell and sentenced him through the cell door. The
Wow.
procedure, there was no due course of law, and there never has been.
No.
Straight on to remand to be liberated in due course of law. Well, the legal person was, because that's what reporting to have there. But there was no court appearances to justify why he'd been put on remand or anything like that. Anybody that's been in the criminal justice, system will tell you that you cannot. It's impossible to be put onto remand unless you've had a court hearing to say why. What because obviously lots of people have background, don't they? Well, Donald's got no background. He's never even had a parking ticket under that legal commercial name. So
Crazy.
so basically, it was about just, getting him in there, out the way, and then hoping to, fulfill the next part of the plan, really, which I'll sort of can explain that in a while. So does that sort of clear that up for you then as to
It
why?
does. Yeah, it does. So, and if you'd have told me that 2 years ago, I'd have probably been going, really, really, really. But over the last 2 years,
I think
nothing, nothing shocks me anymore.
how complex and how much plotting, hatching, and scheming they do to get these contracts, because that's what it is. Everything's in commerce, and that's the point. It's incredible, really, but that's what they do. It's a big money making racket.
So when he was unlawfully dragged out and then obviously put into prison without due process, what were you doing? Were you sort of trying to interact to help release him, or was it just all stonewalling at this point?
Well, we know how the Crown works, and let's call it the Crown Corporation works. Okay, that's what they do. They stonewall. They refuse to, admit that the problem is there, and that's how they get away with what they do. People, if you're listening, because 99% of people give in.
Yeah,
And a lot of the time because they're using their system, which it involves money, and we know that the whole system is there to benefit people with money, and that's how Donald's story started, because it was to benefit the ex-spouse who had the contacts, and the network to facilitate what her aim was, which was to asset strip Donald, leave him homeless and have him basically locked up. This is the depth of this, and we're not dealing with, what I would call, I don't know, well-meaning people nowadays,
yeah, actual real souls.
yeah,
Yeah, no.
all question what reality is there. So that was the modus operandi. It was all about the money, as simple as that. And with the court system and any of these agencies that work alongside them, it's all about the money. They don't care about you as a woman or him as a man or them as a child. Everybody is a financial asset, and
Yeah.
that is what we administrate, the financial asset.
Yeah. And we know now, don't we, that the judges are bankers, they're not judges, and that there are bonds that have been created for every case hearing that then get securitized and is monetized. And so for the longer it goes on, for somebody like Donald, I mean, they're cashing in big time.
Well, they're not cashing in big time. They've got a big problem, all right, because they haven't got what they've wanted. So you've asked me for a bit of the legal background there. And what I could say there is that's how they've shafted the legal entity. Well, the legal entity is just a bit of paper. But what Donald does, he's never used the surname, okay, throughout this whole period of incarceration. And they actually took him that he had fully expressed his status as a living man to the Crown Corporation before they kidnapped him. Okay, so they were unable to process him properly. This is what people don't realise. They can only process you when you consent to their terms and conditions of contract. But when you don't do that and you stand in your power as a living man or woman, and you've done it effectively and consistently, then they have to get that consent from you, which they got from Donald 2.5 years later. So, you know, a surname is just a Crown Corporation, created commercial artificial person. And, you know, all the administrative courts, which we're talking about here, need consent to contract you, God's creation, which you are, the living woman or man, to consent to be that, as we, you know, utilising that name, that surety name on that artificial person, short form birth certificate. And they haven't attained this with Donald. Because they haven't got his consent. And that's why we're where we are. He can't be processed properly. And that is why all the paperwork is all fraudulent and uttered. So although we've had the conversation about what that was about, why did they come and get him and X, Y, and Z, the fact of the matter is all that paperwork was in fraud. It was every bit of it was fraudulent and uttered. Just like if a house from you. Donald is an asset to the state, but they can only fill out that paperwork correctly once he's consented, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's where we are, you know, where we are with that. So to go back, I suppose, to the beginning. So they took him to HMP Perth. He was never put on remand officially because they couldn't do it. They couldn't bring him into the court. So the whole thing's built on sand. And HMP Perth, he was there for more or less a year. And I don't know if anybody's watched the other information out there, but the whole process of what they put Donald through, where they never even brought him to what you call the first hearing. So they'd purportedly arrested him on the basis that he'd not gone to this first diet hearing. But when it came to the first diet hearing, while he was locked up in Perth, they didn't take him to it. So what happened was the procurator and the judge employed an advocate who put a plea in for him, and this advocate had never even spoken to Donald. So there was no contract in place. So they ran a hearing, which he never attended, so he never put this plea in. They then ran a kangaroo court hearing for five days, I think it was, found him guilty, but the woman, the advocate that was supposed to be actually representing the legal entity, hadn't even spoken to Donald. That's because there was no contract in place. It was all what you call a show trial. And then what they did was they put an article in the newspaper. Well, we know why they put articles in the newspaper, don't we? It's basically to smear So they somebody to the general public, so everybody thinks, well, what did he do? What didn't he do? And what that all that does, it's an inversion, is it flips it from, who really is the culpable party.
So presumably that news article was saying that he defrauded his ex-wife.
But what I can tell you is no evidence was ever produced. Donald was never in the dock at any time. He was never in the vicinity of the court. He was stood in a doorway all the way through. And he was never sentenced as that legal entity. There's no photographs in the newspapers or anything like that, because they have to have a consent from that body to be that legal entity. For them to enable them to put photographs in the newspaper. They never got that from Donald. So the whole 2.5 years is solely been about breaking him into commercial contract.
So what? So
Yeah.
what's been happening to him while he's been inside? You said he was at Perth for a year.
Yeah, so since he's been, taken away back in January, he's been in how many prisons now? 5. So he was in HMP Perth for a year. He they've used a definite operational modus operandi all the way through. So HMP Perth was really about appeasement. What I mean about appeasement is he was put in, on a remand wing in a high security prison. And what it is that the reporting he did, that would never have happened in the first place. But they wanted to treat him as badly as they could to try and force this commercial contract. So they put him in this really awful wing, thinking, oh, he's 60-odd-year-old, never been in prison in his life. Within 2 or 3 months, we'll have him broken, and then we'll get him in the system, processed in the system, either in an open prison, on tag, whatever. But it's not happened for them, still to this day. So he used to see a governor once a week and all this, and this governor used to say, is there anything you need? And what he was actually assessing Donald's mindset, and how easy it was for them to get them to contract and to consent. But obviously Donald knows how the system worked. He was never going to do that. Not just so, they tried that, and in the end they realized that they were in too deep. So what they did then was they moved into HMP Greenock, which was the worst, or is the worst, basically, prison from a construction point of view in the whole of the Scottish Prison Service establishment. It's a slum. If anybody had any idea how some of these men are being treated in these prisons, they'd absolutely be mortified. I mean, there was sewerage coming up out the plug holes. It's like a Victorian prison, you know what I mean? No ventilation. So he was put there, basically starved, had special teams of guards on that were basically just there to break his spirit. They used to incite all the prisoners to gang up on him, and it just spoken to like absolute garbage day in, day out. So they went from Perth, where it was appeasement, to Greenock, which was a slum. That didn't work. So then they decided to move him on to Kilmarnock. Well, Kilmarnock is a biometrics prison. So it's so basically everything that you do within that establishment is biometric. So even if you want to go, if you want to go for exercise, if you want to whatever it is that you want to do, education, canteen, all the rest of it, there's a biometric element. And they thought, well, we'll get him that way for sure, because if he wants anything in this prison, then he's going to have to commit to the biometric system. He didn't do that. So they ended up, and there's media out there, they ended up nearly murdering him again in an assault at HMP Kilmarnock about a year ago it is now. Again,
When you say again, when did they first try and murder him?
they tried again on the 6th of June, which is where there's media out on that as well, which I'll explain that to you in a minute. He's been through about five assaults in total. 6 assaults, I think it is, in total, by teams of I don't know, 6 to 10 guards, let's say. All young fellas on an agenda to beat down this older bloke who's in his 60s, and to try and get him to break him, basically, break him into consent. It's honestly, they are thugs.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I mean, in a different way, I've seen it myself in terms of, these house repossessions and house takebacks. Um, I've seen the amount of thuggery and violence that the police are capable of. I mean, this is nothing compared to what Donald's been through, but one of the guys that's that's always there at these takebacks and repossessions, he's in his 80s, and this copper punched him and into a bush, and it's just like, and he's only a little bloke, you know what I mean?
Listen, I'm sorry, but these people are demonized.
Yeah,
We're not we're not living in normal times. We're the hosts of spiritual wickedness. At the end of the day, we're not living. People think they label these things as mental health or this, that, and the other. They're actually demonized. This has been very, very insightful, and we're a part. It's a spiritual enlightenment. It's a time that we are actually living in these, in these biblical times that we're living in now.
yeah,
Makes sense for the way that people are conducting themselves. They're either on that big wide road, or the fighting for truth, for justice and righteousness, which is all under the teachings, if we're being honest, of Jesus Christ, because he was the one that taught us to treat others as you would want to be treated yourself. And all of us that are on that path are trying to do the right thing against great adversity and evil, quite honestly, and Donald has been at the cutting edge of it.
I don't know if you've seen recently the posts that have been circulating, and I'm not going to remember all the categories, but there's a lot of stuff I'm seeing now that's basically saying that the real divine souls on this planet, the likes of Donald and yourself, are, well, one post said 1 billion out of 8 billion. There's 7 other billion, if there are 7 other billion on this planet, are a mixture of synthetic clones, non-player characters, and I can't remember the third one. And then I saw one this morning where it says it's probably as little as 150 million souls on this planet are actually divine souls that, deep knowing, authenticity, not going to take the shit, not going to sell their soul to the devil, all of that sort of stuff. And then the
Yeah.
rest of the people, like these arseholes in the prison, they're not actually divine souls. They're just here playing a part in a game, in a virtual reality game.
Well, this is it. I mean, there's a lot of. I just prefer to concentrate my energies on the fact that, yeah, it's clear to see it's a spiritual war,
Yeah.
and believe that, and just like the Bible says that strong delusion is out there. So some of us are meant to see, have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, whereas others aren't.
Mm.
But to do is just concentrate on sticking on that right path. And I encourage everybody. I know this isn't a podcast as such, but I recommend that everybody does actually look at the Bible and see where we are in the world, because there are a lot of people that claim to know the Bible but they haven't read it. And when you read it, it's a living book. It connects to you. But obviously, this is about Donald, really, and the fact that he is of that ilk. He believes, as I said, that we're in a spiritual war, and his integrity has been amazing, because he does everything that Satan's disciples, for want of a better word, would hate. So, what does Satan's disciples want to do? They want to provoke you. They want to provoke you into a reaction. He's the provocateur. So by provoking you to a reaction, that then gives them the trigger to do what they want to you. Okay, it's like you've consented to their treatment of you through those actions. But Donald hasn't. He's never retaliated. He's never done anything. And even in some of the assaults that have come in, he said, "I forgive you. I forgive you." And not in a condescending way, but that he doesn't feel that malice in his heart, because he knows that God will provide at the end of the day. But all I can say to you is, these people, the way that they respond, Mel, is just incredible. It's like they can't stand to look at him. It's like it's repulsive to them. It's like, the more that he's like that, the more they are repelled by it. And this is what we're all seeing. And people that would vouch for that, because there's many witnesses to what's going on with Donald here.
Have you been able to visit him in the last 2.5 years?
No, so I haven't seen him, nor any of the people that give all the love and support out there for over 2.5 years. The reason why is by me going in, or anybody else, is you're complying to their terms and conditions.
Oh, right.
You're accepting, you're going through about that biometrics, you're giving everything over, and I'm a living woman under my creator, just like he is. So the answer to that is no.
But you have spoken to him by phone, because that's right, yeah, because I did hear, and I think this is probably what you were referring to earlier, the latest one in June. Is that the phone call that's sort of been circulated a little bit, the recording of that phone call?
They said I've got to go to court. They're going to assault me again. Person stated on this call. They said to me at the beginning, said the governor's given permission to do whatever they like. That's about 10 or 12. They're all taking turns. And it was a game to them. It was a game. See who could make me scream the loudest. They thought it was funny. I kept saying, I forgive you, and they just kept laughing. They made sure I had no shoes on, so my feet were dragged along the concrete all the way. My feet are all bloody. And they kept saying, if you consent, walk with us. And I kept saying, I do not consent. I do not consent. I do not consent. I do not consent. Surprise, surprise, the court called it off when they found out that I hadn't consented. They're saying it's my fault because I wouldn't consent. There was one bit where I stopped responding and one of them shouted, the old bastard's dead. Get the nurse, the old bastard's dead, he said. It was just, you've no idea. You've no idea. No idea.
Yeah, so that was basically just post an assault. So it had 3 assaults, one after the other, at HMP Grampian. One where they instigated. The first one was where they instigated a prisoner to push him to the ground and bully him. That was the first one, and then he had 2 a month. Was it a week apart or a month? I think it was a week apart, 2 assaults. Yeah, the last one being on the 6th of June, and that's the audio that's circulating, where they dragged him across concrete floors, basically trying to force him into consent. Lots of people don't realise how easy it is to consent to the commercial system. You can consent by what you call conduct, and by your conduct, you are then accepting their authority to act, basically, for want of a better word. So it's just like when you go into the dock, or even if you turn up at court. That's the other thing. What you're actually doing is you're accepting through conduct their authority to act. And this is why they've not been able to do what they've wanted with Donald. So, comply and consent, 2 different things, because compliance is all to do with terms and conditions, and we're living in a corporate world, corporate commercial world. Yeah.
Oh, it's so confusing, isn't it? I mean, I'm in the courts myself, for a couple of different things. One being a bankruptcy that I'm trying to get annulled, and I wasn't in the hearing because my guy that was representing got assaulted outside, and they wouldn't take some evidence, and so it was all done in my absence. So you're like, so that was granted in my absence, and since then I've been trying to get it annulled. So to do that, I have to turn up to court. Do you know what I mean? So it's like it's such tricky ground for people to try and navigate.
I mean, for me here in this conversation, it's not that's a whole different podcast in itself.
Yeah.
To go into all that kind of thing. All I can tell you is that with the Donald's situation, they haven't got what they want. We know that. It's what it is. As I said, he hasn't. They haven't got joinder to that artificial person. And he's done it So quite honestly, and that's why they've had to go to such lengths. It's basically to force that body into compliance. Spent lots and lots of resources on this, Mel. And
Gosh, yeah.
been in for 5 different prisons. I've had teams of special guards on him, specially to enact what they've done. And this is why Donald, I'm not, you've probably heard on the other podcast, he's a very special man because of his fortitude and tenacity. He's been locked in a concrete box for 23 and a half hours a day for 2.5 years. And when they come up and use that commercial name, he still responds with, I'm not that commercial entity. That's not me, which it isn't.
Yeah.
So, and this is it. And they can only use that. That's all all they can do. That's all those administrative courts have the jurisdiction over, that artificial commercial short form birth certificate. This is what people don't realise. That there are higher authorities that actually oversee them, and this is the problem that they've got with Donald, because they've allowed it. They thought it would have been done and dusted in 6 months. Just guessing 6 months, but in a short time. They didn't really. Still going on 2.5 years, and they've grown arms and legs, and everybody was getting to know about their dirty little secrets, quite honestly, because these things go on behind closed doors. But as God says, what's in the dark will come to light.
Yeah.
What's side rooms will be shouted from the rooftops, and this is what's happening.
Well, this is the story of one man, but we know damn well that there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of Donalds stuck in the prison system, dotted around England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, and the rest of the world, let's be honest.
That's right, yeah. So they thought they were being very, very sophisticated. So they wanted to asset strip, to go back to it, and smear the legal entity in the newspaper to cover up the fraud, because that's what they do. This is what, we know that these newspapers that work alongside the courts are part of the club.
Yeah.
Told what to do. And this is a naivety of people, but thankfully now things are beginning to change. People are beginning to look at things more skeptically and say, well, just because that's in the newspaper, it doesn't mean it's right. Okay. So they put the newspaper in to smear it and cover up the fraud. And then they use these trumped up charges as smoke screens. And that's exactly what happened. And with Donald, they used the kangaroo court to lock him up. And it was a double whammy. They had to lock him up for not engaging with the lower administrative courts with the ex-spouse in a divorce, so that they could get what they wanted, which was this asset strip. But they all earned lots of money from this.
Donald, did they take has the asset gone now?
She was allocated everything that Donald owns. This is a woman, okay, and I'm going to come out with it. Quadruple married.
Wow.
Allocated on fraudulent documents everything that Donald has. Does that sound like anything that's valuable? Well, no, of course it's not valuable. Does that sound like it's bias? Of course. And why? Because it's a big boys club. It's all about assets and purported, adverse financial disputes, basically financial disputes. In any court, that there's no difference really between criminal and civil courts. That the criminal label is basically just to scare people, really, more than anything.
I mean, the fact that they've carried on, they haven't been able to process Donald, they haven't convicted him, they haven't proven anything, and yet it's still been allocated to a woman that's made this claim.
Yeah. So that happened. Yeah, that happened beforehand. Yeah, that's exactly it. What they did in this court, as I say, there's more media out. They joined the two courts up on the same day. Don't forget, Donald wasn't in the court. You're quite right. He's not being convicted of anything because he wasn't in the dock. He never saw the evidence against him. He never saw any of it. There was nothing. So quite rightfully, of course, he has had no due course of law. So whatever they're saying he's been sentenced to or convicted of is just it's a one-sided contract without a signature on it. I think it's the best way to put it.
Yeah,
that makes sense. So that's really it. But what people need to understand is, first of all, it's financial. That's how these courts work. It's all about financial bonds and claims. Okay, nothing more. And justice is just a byproduct. Right, you are coming in for, I'm going to get you in for drink driving. That's just a byproduct of it. The first thing they've got is the financial element of it. They've got the name, have they got the signature, have they got what they need? And that is number one. And then they might think a little bit about, whether there's any justice going to be exercised. But the times that we're living in now, of course, it's, what can I say, really? It's, there is no justice, is there?
No, and more people are seeing that themselves, that what we say, the normies or whatever, in terms of the fact that there's no free speech, that people are being locked up for memes and Facebook posts or whatever, WhatsApp messages. You've got the police at your door if you've put something on social media, but if a 12-year-old's just been raped by somebody, they don't give a shit. So this is going wider. People are starting to see, well, what the hell? They don't, the people that are waking up won't have the level of knowledge that you've got and I'm attaining and growing with, but they are seeing the bullshit. So videos and podcasts like this about what's happening with Donald, and there'll be people watching this that'll know somebody that knows somebody that's got somebody else in a similar situation. I was trying to help a lady with some paperwork. Not that I'm an expert by any stretch of the imagination. For exactly the same thing, her husband refused to join her, and he was unlawfully detained for 6 weeks and beaten, and he was in his 60s.
Yeah.
Luckily, he was finally released at the 6 weeks, but it continues. The persecution is still carrying on now. So what can people, obviously doing podcasts like this is so integral to get the awareness for Donald's story out there. And I'm guessing, I don't know if you've tried to contact mainstream media to get this in the papers or not, but I'm guessing they wouldn't anyway. So what can people do? People that are watching, what's the solution? And I think you've got a Facebook group as well. So what can people do if they want to support and really spread the message far and wide?
Well, I think they can write and get in touch. Basically, we do have a Facebook page. I mean, I can get some more information on that. Actually, I don't, because there's somebody that's working alongside that knows quite a lot about that side of it. But what people have been doing is writing letters, sending, voice notes, that things like that, just to lift lift the morale of him, because it's very hard. It's real endurance to have to stand firm like he has done for this amount of time. But of course it's his faith that lets him do it. So writing letters, voice notes, and basically getting in touch, and we'll make sure that all the information and the links are there for you. I think that's the best thing to do, so that people can find out the best ways to support the people, the organisations that are supporting Donald. So I'm just speaking about him here, but he's got lots of people that also work and support around in that area as well.
Are you confident that these letters that are being written and presumably posted to the prison, are you confident that they're being received by Donald?
Oh, well, that's the other thing. I mean, that's the interesting thing. They do everything to torture him against all protocol. So, for example, they won't allow stamps to be sent in. So they'll give a convicted prisoner that's gone through the system stamps. No problem if you sent them in. With Donald, they won't allow it. If somebody sends postcards or letters in, they give him bad photocopies of them. So he's not even allowed to touch the paper that you've written that well-meaning letter on. You know, everything that every telephone call that he has is basically, what is it, listened to. So, you know, and it's all put through a machine. So he's not even getting the benefit of listening to you directly. I mean, everything that they do is about torture. And, you know, he's had 2.5 years of it. Now, one thing I will say is he'll never give in. But, you know, he's been through malnutrition. And, you know, he's going to be, his physical situation after 2.5 years is a major concern to us.
Yeah. And not
Be
mentioning
a,
the PTSD and all the rest of it that he's going to be suffering when he comes out.
I
So
mean,
if people are doing voice notes, so they basically sharing those with you through some kind of medium, and then you're able to play that, when you're on the phone to him, or
yeah. So I think I think that's the case. So I think the best thing to do is basically we give you the links, and then anybody that wants to help and support Donald to get in touch, and there will be more information on how they can do that. But yes,
yeah. I've just
help.
brought up the Facebook group here, and it's called Free Don and Justice. So that's free, capital DON. So that's all one word, and justice, and it's an ampersand and justice. And it's a private group for people, obviously, that can get more information. And I think you've probably got in here addresses and things that they could write to, have you?
Yeah, of course, and yeah, they can get that from there. And also, then you've got the email, which is God's Children, or capital letters 144 at protonmail.com as well. So, you know, that's another. So if anybody wants to help, then please do. There's plenty of things that people can do, and what everybody needs to remember is that this is standing up. This is for everybody.
Yeah.
I think what does it mean to separate yourself off from the system? What does it really mean? You know, at the end of the day, this is Satan's satanic system of feudal control of mankind, and in this country, it's operated by us being citizens
Yeah.
of the Crown Corporation. Now, what Donald's suffering is because he's removed himself from being a citizen. They are now trying to, basically torture him into getting back into the box. So they're trying to put a round peg into a square hole. And, but at the end of the day, they still have to have that consent. So, the amazing thing is we are living in times where we have to stand firm. It was never going to be easy. And we see as things have rolled out, Mel, with just in general, with everybody around and the situations that have been going on the street, like you say, with these houses and the rest of it, that this is full on tyranny, basically.
It absolutely is, and it's becoming more and more obvious every day. And it's friggin' exhausting, for those people, especially. I mean, I can only imagine. Well, I can't even imagine what Donald's going through or how he feels. But I know that given what you've shared, his faith in something bigger and better, and whether that's God or divine source, however he sees it, that's what keeps people going, isn't it? Because if you didn't have that, and I feel for the people that don't think there is anything,
Oh
because
yeah. I don't think we should be scared, and I'm not going to be scared of actually speaking the fact that we stand under Jesus Christ here, and that any of Jesus's followers are going to be persecuted because a slave isn't greater than his master, and what Jesus went through is what every single one of us potentially have to go through to be on that right path. And
mm,
I think, wow, she's a bit extreme. But at the end of the day, when you live in what we're living and you've seen what's gone on here with this Donald thing, it blows your mind on what reality really is. It really does. That this UK judicial system, is it's rotten to the core. We know what they do. They use false documentation, trumped up charges. They vanish people off. Kangaroo courts. And it's not a crime thriller or a conspiracy theory, is it?
No.
You know, in reality, Donald's in a torture chamber, and that torture chamber is called HMP Grampian at the moment. And I think, and I want to, everybody to focus on the fact of what he's actually been going through. They've damaged him physically. Yes, he has physical, physical injuries from that last assault on the 6th of June. People need to recognise that he's not going to come out the man that he did from a physical point of view.
Is there anything that I haven't pointed to or asked that you wanted to try and get across today, or do you think we've covered what you wanted to cover?
Well, I mean, what is there anything that you would want to know yourself that I've missed? At the end of the day, it's a very, very convoluted, long story, so it's very, very difficult to get something in that's gone on for such a long time into the space of an hour. But basically, corruption is what got him in, and fraud was what got him in. So how are they going to get him out of there? I think that's the question everybody needs to be asking themselves. All I can say also is if anybody thinks that anything that they're holding him on, and we've got the evidence, it has any semblance of anything that is regular and that anybody else that's been through the judicial system would have, then they're mistaken. Donald is held on fraudulent and uttered documentation. You know what I mean? It's not just a statement, we have evidence of that.
Yeah.
So his torturous situation is so that they can basically amend what it is that they've done. Because quite honestly, basically, they've locked a man up in a prison for 2.5 years in Scotland. So number one, they can punish him predominantly for his stance, which is, I think we have all got an insight into that now. Number two, to benefit, for the financial benefit of certain individuals. And what is it? And the number three really is just to, as I say, it's mainly to punish him for what he's done and to asset strip. Because what they wanted to attain was to basically get everything from him. They wanted win, 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 win. So a win for them would have been to force him into commercial contract. That way they're earning shed loads of money all the time because he's in the system. Number two, they can asset strip to everybody's advantage. You know what I mean? That would have been their ideal. But unfortunately, because of Donald's faith, integrity, and tenacity, they've not attained what they've wanted. So they are still in a situation of fraud.
Yeah.
Everything in fraud. It's
Yeah.
as simple as that. I hope that that's cleared it up, and that people can get to grips and understand at least the rudimentary principles of the story.
Yeah, and you're quite right. You said there about, it's fraud and corruption that have got him into this situation, and we know the system is rotten to the core, and it's going to be bloody difficult to get him out of it, because that means that these people have to admit that they were wrong, or they'll come up with some bullshit reason why all of a sudden he can be released. I think it's important to say to yourself and to the audience, there are conversations happening with or without your knowledge, between people about trying to raise more awareness on this, whether that's hounding the prison with lots of phone calls talking about Donald, so they know that there's a bigger audience watching them.
I think what's very important as well is, like you say, this and for anybody listening, because we know that anybody and everybody listens to this, is that there are other people scrutinising this from a global level. This isn't just about me sat here having this little conversation and trying to tell them that I know how the system works. It's not about that at all. This isn't a conversation about that. At the end of the day, Donald never did what he did for any other reason, that he recognised and got the knowledge of how corrupt the system was. And once you have that knowledge, you can't go back. Basically, going back is basically, to him, And to people of that ilk, it's like doing a deal with the devil, saying, well, it's all corrupt and I know it's evil, but I'll do a bit of this and I'll do a bit of that. No, we've got to stand up and we've got to stand firm, and that's what he's doing. And so, yeah, I know that the conversations are happening elsewhere, and I know that it's happening not just here, but in other places, and it needs to, because this is the truth, and the light needs to be shone, and it will continue to be so, and that is our faith.
Yeah.
Moving forward. But as I say, please, anybody that wants to support, please get in touch. As we've said, you've got the mediums there, and see what we can do. And if anything, it'll boost Donald up to know that he's got this love and support out there. Because I'm going to say something, you won't be disappointed. He's a good man, and and the people that work alongside and that know Donald and have heard him and sense it. It's undeniable, and this is people never factored in. They put a man in prison that had basically never even had a parking ticket. You know what I mean? It's just like like picking up a little old Joe on the street, and it was just and they tried to make him into a criminal. I know it sounds awful. I'm not justifying the fact that the way they treat anybody in these places, but all of those lads or young men in those prisons have got reams of paperwork this thick. Donald's held on 2 blank pieces of paper. They've all been in and out of prison all their lives. So in a way, those young men know why they're in there. And they sort of accept it in a way as going with the territory. But what they did with Donald is they picked somebody that was clean, somebody that never had any background whatsoever, an older guy, and a Christian guy with morals. And even the prisoners are saying, "What the hell are you doing in here?" So in actual fact, what the judiciary have done and the complicit parties that have been part of it, they've just made themselves look like total fools.
Yeah.
I was trying to be a bit polite about
Well,
that.
I could have said something way worse, but I best not. Yeah, exactly. And like you said, the light will shine regardless, and it will, you can't stop the light. It's always going to expose the darkness and eradicate the darkness. And that's what he's doing day by day, as tough as it is for him and as tough as it is for you and the rest of his family and the people that love him.
There's a lot of love out there for him. And, they're either fools, as we've just said there, or they're that arrogant and confident in their, let's call it, blatant criminality that they don't give 2 hoots. So which
combination of all of it, you've got some that have been brainwashed beyond belief and think
yeah.
they're doing the right thing. You've got some that are just there because they like a bit of fucking drama and are just shitty people. And then maybe we've got some reptiles, some synthetic clones, and who knows what else in there. So yeah.
Well, I think that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is where we are. So, but everybody just remember before we go, it's 30 months of torture, intimidation and coercion under the Scottish Prison Service, okay, whose motto, all right, and I like to say this, is unlocking potential and transforming lives.
Wow.
That's what they say. So this is the truth, okay? And any of the agencies as well, just before I go, is that work alongside, okay, and nothing more than just to make people think, people like the Ombudsman, the Inspectorate, they're all just there to make people think that there's checks and balances and that there actually is some process in place. But in actual fact, they're all bought and paid for. They're all part of the the web of control and deceit. Quite
yeah.
yeah, that's how dark it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like
Well,
shine light, you know.
Well, thank you, Michelle. And it was a mutual friend of ours that reached out to ask if you could come on, and I was like, absolutely, because I'd heard of the story some time ago, and I am part of those conversations about people maybe going up on a coach, maybe making some phone calls, all of that sort of thing. So I'm not sure where all that's got to. But I absolutely just sending you all my love and strength and healing to you and everybody. And just to remind the audience, it's Freedom Justice on the Facebook group, or God's Children 44, was it?
Yeah, it's God's Children, capital letters 144 at protonmail.com.
Yeah, protonmail.com. So, guys, do your voice notes, send the love, write some letters, make some phone calls, be a friggin' nuisance. The more that they realize that people have got eyes on the shitty, horrible, demonic behavior that they are doing right now, the quicker we can get him out.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, can't imagine dragging a 60-odd-year-old bloke along concrete floors. I mean, just to finish it, this is the depths of it. So it's obscene, isn't it?
it is absolutely obscene.
Like you say. So thank you so much. Yeah, what more can I say?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Thank you. Love and light.
Right.